Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing great. It's so lovely to have you here today. And thank you to Wendy for commenting on my shoulder action. That is about the limit of my moves. I can pretty much choose my arms, my shoulders, or my feet. I can't move each simultaneously. So that's pretty much how I dance. So anyway, good morning. I do need to work on the moves, Carl. You are right. Good morning, everyone. It's so lovely to have you here. We've got Anne watching in from New Zealand, which is already bloody incredible. It's bloody lovely. So welcome to the Marketing Meetup once again. I can tell you that I'm just absolutely buzzing to be here this morning. So keep that chat feature going. Drop in the chat where you're watching from. I can see Claire's in Madrid there. We've got Jason in Sussex. We've got folks in London. We've got Richard with his windows open. Copenhagen, amazing. Just absolutely wicked. It fills my heart with so much joy. So thank you all so much for being here. I've got two challenges for you this morning, as ever. The first is that chat feature is so special. Like, people don't get how special that chat feature is. So please do keep it buzzing throughout the duration of today's session. Honestly, it means so much. And like, I think it really adds to the event as a whole. So please do take the time to, if you hear something you like, just say, I like it. Or if something resonates, quote the tweet, quote the quote, or whatever it is, take this opportunity to look after each other and share this experience. This is an exercise in co-creation this morning, and we can co-create an experience which is bloody wicked. The second thing I would absolutely adore is, should you enjoy today's webinar? If you don't enjoy today's webinar, then don't do this. And that is to share it on social media. Your biggest takeaway from today's session. I think today's topic is really interesting, and we've got Vaughan here who is really good at it. But we've got the opportunity today to sort of share about a bit of knowledge that comes from Vaughan's brains to our own. So please do share on social media after today's session. If those two challenges are lodged in your mind, all about sharing and all about keeping that chat feature buzzing, then let's get on with today's introduction. So today we have Vaughan Flood of Flood and Partners. Now, I met Vaughan through the Better Briefs survey last year, which Mark Ritson named as one of the top 10 most important moments in marketing in the entire year of 2021. But that isn't the thing that I find particularly impressive. I don't know about you, but like, sometimes when you sort of see things from people you admire out in the world, and like, you enjoy it, and then you realize who wrote it, that's really cool. And I had one of these moments with Vaughan. So I just completed the Mark Ritson mini MBA in marketing, and at the end of the mini MBA, they send out this survey. Now, I went into this survey and I was curious anyway, because it was done by Mark Ritson, so I thought it'd be a good survey. But I was going through and I was like, bloody hell, this is the best survey I've ever done. This is like amazing. So I actually started recording the survey as I went, and thank you to everyone sort of pointing out my camera stuff. So I started recording the survey as I went through, and I was like, this is miraculous. And as a marketing geek, I was like, wow. Anyway, I got to the end of the survey, and it was only bloody Vaughan who'd gone and done it. It was him who created it. And I was like, wow, that's something special. So I was kicking myself and thinking he's a very cheeky man. And today we get an hour with him. So I think that's really cool. Today is a presentation, and then it's a Q&A. So we have an opportunity to hear from Vaughan, and then we've got the opportunity to ask a bunch of questions. And really, what I really love is some really great questions for Vaughan. Really put him on the spot. Let's really try and see what let's see what we can do to make this the best session we possibly can together. The way you do that is you use the Q&A feature, which is found down below. Wiggle your mouse and you'll find in Zoom there's a Q&A feature. Drop your questions in there, and that's where we'll pop them and be taking them. Finally, before we get going and I hand over to Vaughan, I just want to say a big thank you today for today's sponsors, today's featured sponsor. So this week it is Redgate Software. Redgate Software are a phenomenal company who are hiring a bunch of marketers right now. They pay great rates, they've got a lovely culture, they've got a lovely canteen if you ever go into the office, but they're also open to remote. working. So for anyone looking to grow within a technology company, there's really, very few places that I'm aware of, at the very least, that are better than Redgate. So do take the time to check them out. I'll link them after today's session. With all that said, also a big thank you to our other sponsors who will be featured on rotations. So thank you to Attest, Content Square, Hrefs, Impression, Content Cal, Cambridge Marketing College, Brand Recruitment, Gravity Global, and Third Light. We'll feature those in other weeks as we go through. So that is my introduction done. So I get to now hand over to the very lovely Vaughan and say, mate, it's over to you.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for that very kind, amazing, and probably over-the-top introduction. Always welcome. And hello and welcome everybody who's been crazy enough to come along and join in this call. And hopefully we'll have a bit of fun. I am gonna share a deck if I can master the basics of.
So we're 2 years in now.
So we're 2 years in. I've got no excuse. You're absolutely right. So
sweet. We got.
Is that kind of showing?
Yeah. We got you.
Let me know. Yeah, that looks like it's going. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for having me along. Thanks for inviting me. Here to talk about quant research surveys, really. And my view is quant research has the power to be the most amazing source of insight, because you're combining robustness with the ability to kind of get inside people's heads. But I would suggest that, too often, we don't actually get to everything that's going on inside people's heads. They hold back. They don't tell you everything. And that, I guess, is what I mean by the unspeakable truth, is that people are holding things inside them. I just, this is a marketing meeting, so I thought there better be a bit of marketing of ourselves in here. I just thought I better just quickly introduce ourselves. And the first thing I want to say is that when Joe talks about me doing stuff, it's not really me. It's my wonderful, wonderful team that's doing most of it. But anyway, quick hello from us. What we're fundamentally about is simply making the research experience a lot more fun for respondents and rewarding for clients. We do have our own proprietary software, and it did win the Innovation of the Year last year from Aura. And what we're about is pushing the boundaries of what Quant can do. But in the main, this isn't a sales pitch for our methodology, much as I'd like to do that. I will touch on a few of those things, but it's fundamentally, it's about thinking about how do we create better, more engaging surveys that get people to open up. And the first thing I would just want to say, which I think is very in tune with shall we say, the marketing meetup mindset anyway, is fundamentally, whatever you're doing, whatever kind of survey you're doing, think that we're not dealing with data, we're dealing with humans. That's what lies at the heart of this, is that you've got to put yourself in the position of the respondent. What's it like being the respondent? And I mean, I don't know about you. I'm crazy for doing surveys. I love doing surveys. If you haven't done a survey recently, get out there and do them, because you'll learn so much. You'll learn what it's like to be a human doing a survey. What did you think? Was it fun? Was it stimulating? Did it engage you? Or were you maybe a little bit jaded, a little bit bored somewhere along the way? Did you give up? I mean, who knows? But you need to get out there and try it. The thing about humans is humans are quite difficult, really, in their own little way. Humans, might decide to tell you a lot. They might. It's a bit like, when you're talking to somebody down a coffee shop or whatever. You could tell the person you're with a lot, or you might tell them not so much. So there's, the boundaries of what you will and won't say are not fixed. So the first thing you've got to say is, how do you get this person to tell me more? And that depends so much on how you decide to approach them. The other thing is that and this is often true in a lot of marketing surveys, is that people actually are, they're nice, they're willing to tell you stuff, but actually they find it really difficult to express themselves. They find themselves a bit stuck for words because a lot of the times the things you say, like, how do you feel about Orangina, is maybe not something that they've agonized over much of their lives. And so they're quite happy to tell you, but actually they don't quite know where to start. So the sense of being stuck for words is very real, and people need help because, if you find a way of letting them express themselves, they will, they might. So it's all about humans. It's all about making sure that we get maximum disclosure, that we get to what would otherwise be their unspoken, unsayable, unsaid truth. First thing I want to start off looking at are things that we call conversation killers. These are things not to do, please, but we see them all the time. And there's three things here that I want to touch on. The first thing is about the wrong tone. It's just talking to people in the wrong way. The second thing is about being a bit of a bore. And the third one is about just outstaying your welcome. And I'm going to talk relatively fast, so I try not to fall into that latter trap. What do I mean by the wrong tone? Well, hopefully this is large enough on your screens for you to kind of see that. This is from a survey, an investor survey. It's one of my favorites. I've just highlighted the bit that bugged me. You've got this nice enough introduction. It says, note, questions marked with an asterisk are mandatory. And you think, what? Sorry, look, I've come along here, the goodness of my heart, to do your survey. Now you're telling me this is mandatory. What I'd ask you to do is channel your inner Joe Glover, because Joe would never tell you that this something is mandatory. He might say, we'd love it if you could tell us this. It's really important for us, for you, the world, to tell us this. But never, ever say it's mandatory. Never, ever adopt. And this tone of I'm in charge, I'm going to tell you, the respondent, what you can and can't do, infuses too many questionnaires still. Next thing that bugs me almost as much, but maybe not quite as much as that one, is surveys tell people that they've committed errors. Now, this goes back to kind of computer programming back in the dark ages, where you say someone's made a mistake. Oh, there's an error. Next error found. 9 errors found. Now, look, you're just trying to help. You're trying to do a survey. You could say, oops, looks like you missed something here, or whatever. And people feel fine with this. But the tone that so often permeates surveys is that, like a kind of old school demanding boss. And you've got to ask yourself, is that the way to get people to open up? Is that the way to get people to say, you know what, I really want to open my heart to these guys? No. So let's stop taking the wrong tone. Easy one to fix. Next one, which I'm afraid an awful lot of surveys do fall into this trap. And yeah, I'm sure we've done it on a few occasions as well. But it's just being a bit boring. Imagine you're down the pub and you're talking to somebody, and they just keep asking you the same thing, or they keep saying the same thing in a slightly different way. And what do? Well, you're a nice person, so you keep going on, but actually your mind starts to wander on the 15th time you're asked to rate something on a scale of completely disagree, completely agree. Your mind's somewhere else. I mean, what you're tapping is just, it's, oh God, come on, let's get on with this. Let's get on. Can we move on to something else? And it's the easiest problem to fix, because even just by mixing up, put in even on the most rudimentary survey software, there are different types of questions. So, just chuck them in there, and just the sheer act of getting people to do things differently in a different way is kind of good. It's kind of good. The other thing, of course, which, yes, I think we all know about, is outstaying our welcome. Now, this is, you can probably guess from the color scheme who this is from. I hope I'll be very happy if actually there was somebody from the company here. Each one of these little tokens I'm showing on screen is a survey page. And so you've had your luxurious night at the hotel, and you're leaving, and this is what you get sent. And it's, you're a customer, right? And it goes on a bit, actually, and it keeps going on. But I'm going to start clicking a bit faster, actually. But it goes on, and actually you can see most of these questions are pretty similar in what they're asking. And beyond a certain point, perhaps you're not engaging, you're not speaking as much as you might. Now, we all do it. And I've got to say, because it really isn't about them. There are so many more examples. This is from my favorite football team. And again, it's crazy, crazy length and crazy repetitions. We've all done it, but what we actually have to say to ourselves is resist the temptation. This is all about, one extra, I won't attempt the accent, but one extra little wafer, just that little thing. Hopefully we're all familiar with Mr. Creosote, or maybe it's Monsieur Creosote, who just keeps eating till he explodes. And that's what the temptation, because when you're writing yourself, you say, oh yeah, it'd be interesting to find this out. We'll just slip in another question. Don't do it, because you end up with a bloated survey. You end up getting less. The respondent basically explodes. So that's just getting the tone right. And to be honest, our view is that if you get the tone right, you're at least half the way there, because people will go along with it if you talk to them like human beings. But I want to talk to you about sort of how you get more out of people. First things first, there's more to quant than numbers. Numbers are lovely. Numbers, of course, are the backbone of quant, but there's more to it than that. Secondly, recognize that people can be coy or shy in what they say. And thirdly, that they need help expressing the inexpressible. So more to quant than numbers. This is your classic quant question, isn't it? Okay, it's a sort of called a Likert scale. On a scale of 1 to 7, how do we feel about this? And we use them all the time, and that's fine. But we have to think, a lot of the time when we're using a scale, we're asking people to think in an abstract way. We're asking them to come out of the world and then do some mental computation that says, look at the world in terms of numbers. I'll give you an example. This was something from an employee engagement survey. How challenging is it to keep on top of your work? Well, 1 is not at all challenging, and 7 is extremely challenging. Now, we could all answer this. We could all look to do this. And chances are everyone ends up answering typically about 5, don't you? I mean, that's what you say. But then the challenge for us is what does a 5 mean? What's it actually mean? And when you think about it, why not turn this into English, which is what we did with this particular client. Firstly, you'll notice that the question becomes a little bit shorter. You just have to say how challenging it is to keep on top of your work. And you give answers actually directly meaningful. You've not got to translate this into something. And this has 2 wonderful benefits. Firstly, the respondent can answer it much more readily. And secondly, you, the researcher, or even better, your internal stakeholders, actually know what they're saying, actually know what it means. And this actually transformed the way this particular client thought about what they were getting back from this data. And they saw patterns come through from this answer, which wasn't the standard kind of curve, but just by using words. So always think, can I turn this into words, because it can work so much better. Just to give you, and this is not one of our examples. This is something I'll point you to the case study online. But pain is a particularly difficult thing, because if somebody else's pain is always abstract. I mean, I guess we all look at this picture, and I guess it crosses our mind: is this just an actor? Is this bloke really in pain, or is he just faking it? I mean, you just don't know, do you? So, and understanding how much pain someone's in is really important. And this was a study done by American hospitals. And the standard way in the US, and it's probably in the UK as well, of measuring pain is a numeric scale, but they do help with words under it, from no pain to worst possible pain. And they actually compared that with a much simpler scale, which they call their objective pain score, which transformed the way you look at this and into turning it into what's your experience as opposed to how painful do I think something is. So when are you experiencing pain, rather than, if you like, trying to guess the quantity of pain involved. What they discovered, and this was being used real life for real life pain control in hospital, that the objective pain score was massively better, more accurate when it comes to actually helping people decide what medication to give to people, because actually some people exaggerate on describing their pains, other people suffer in silence. The objective pain score, putting things into a tangible framework, and that's the principle to take out of this, not, because I suspect not a lot of us are studying pain a lot of the time, but can we take something and make it tangible, make it meaningful rather than abstract? And the other thing, of course, is that pictures can often be better than numbers. If you take that, classic, we understand you were left waiting over 20 minutes for your call to be answered. On the scale of 1 to 7, how are you feeling when you got through to us? Well, 1, not at all irritated, 7, extremely irritated. Could do it like that. You could do it like this. And from this, you kind of get a sense of, how was I feeling? And most people, okay, they get that. But they're also, you're demonstrating a degree of empathy as you, the survey makers, that just, bring people on board, and it's going to help with all the other questions later on. This you might find this a little harder, although actually you could easily do this with standard software. But going one of the things about marketers is that we do love our abstract concepts like standout. Now, standout does mean a lot to us, but actually, when you're talking to normal people, it's a bit it's a bit abstracty, isn't it? So this would say, okay, so looking at how much do we think that Aldi's Christmas campaign stood out, and you drag the slide and you give them a visual clue. Is it, how much was it? How much did it stand out from other stuff? Again, you're helping people get your head around what we might be talking about. Onto something else, reticence. Sometimes, people are just a little bit coy about what they say, and they just need a little bit of a push, a little bit of encouragement to help them over the edge. Classic case of this is, again, employment engagement surveys, where you ask people, what's it like in your workplace? And everyone's been told it's all private, no one's looking at it, this, that, and the other. But there's a natural, understandable human tendency to hold back and not say quite what's there. Plus, it's also quite hard to know what angle on a topic so big as your workplace you want to go in on. One of our favourites is to say, okay, let's put up images of trees, and I'll come on to why I love trees in a minute. But images of trees, say, which of these images most reminds you of your current workplace? Boom. And it's a bit of a weird question, and about 5% of people always say that. What a stupid question. But most people go along with it, and actually most people actually enjoy it. So, well, mine's like that one. And then it's not really about the tree. Obviously, it's about why did you choose that little artificial Christmas tree or whatever, and it's that and the stories they told there that get you someplace that a straight question never would. Now, I particularly love trees because trees don't really come with a lot of baggage. If you use, which car is your place? Like, everyone's got a view in their head of as to what that make a car stands for, but you don't know what that is. Very few people I've met in life have particularly strong emotional relationships with particular types of trees. I'm sure there are a few out there, but I've yet to come across many of them. But you don't like trees. I kind of like cutlery. It's a bit more culturally specific. On a global survey, it doesn't necessarily work. But you say which set of cutlery is your brand most like? It's quite an interesting question to ask people, and you put up, but give them a choice like this. It gets people. It's an odd question, but it gets people thinking outside the box. And chairs are good, birds are good. So for these kind of projective questions, and I did notice at the start that we've got at least one quali researcher on the call. I should admit that I really by background I'm a quali. This is sort of standard quali techniques which you can bring into quant to massive gain. So there we go. Another thing, I'll skip over this quite quickly because this is quite proprietary, but you can actually do it crudely using standard survey. Is to take people on a kind of story, and we have questions, and you may see this in if you do some of these surveys that we've done. This was about psoriasis, and the story just grows. So he says, and it's in the first person. My psoriasis is quite a problem in my life. A typical bout makes me, we like these emojis. A typical bout makes me feel like this, quite uncomfortable. And worse, it gets me feeling in pain. Flare up as and you see it gradually, it builds up and builds up. And where the story goes depends on what you've already said. So it takes you on a journey. And this was, I won't turn it into a case history, but this had a massive impact on the client in terms of getting them to understand the real journey where most people suffering from psoriasis ended up. But let's go back to stuff we can all do at home, which expressing the inexpressible. One of my favorite examples. We were set the challenge of finding out what teens felt about leading browsers. And we said, look, if you just ask this straight, people just are going to say, well, it's a browser, isn't it? Chrome, yeah, it's browser, yeah, it's got some colors, but it's got a round logo. Oh, well, they've all got round logos. So, what are we going to do to get people to open up there? So we said, well, look, just don't ask them what they think about it. We said, here's some pictures of non-famous people. Which of these browsers do you think each of them best fit with? So we got people to put the people with the browser. And then we could ask them, and we did ask them, why did you put those people where you put them? And actually, again, looking at this, I suspect that immediately some of you will start drawing conclusions as to what lay behind their association. But what really mattered is that suddenly the people who couldn't express themselves could, because you've taken them on a journey, you've put a step in between that helps them answer a simpler question, which then enables them to say, yeah, actually, I tend to see the world in that particular way. A couple of last things before I kind of move on, and you can ask me those difficult questions that I'm fearful of. I'm quite tempted to just keep talking, actually. About maximizing disclosure. One of my big beasts, and something we always talk about, is a lot of the time we want to let people say, don't know. And a lot of time you don't want to let people say no. You say, going to choose this or that, what you're going to choose. And if it's a real choice in real life, I'm all for forcing people to make that choice. But very recently, we were looking at a survey that somebody has constructed, and it was full of statements like, you might come across this thing. It's a company that goes further than most when it comes to protecting the environment. And you think, I barely know this company. How can, and I'm asked to answer this on a scale of 1 to 7, because I think, it goes further than most. I think I think I've heard of the brand, yeah. But how can I possibly answer that? And if you force me to answer it, chances are I'll probably put it in the middle, And so what happens then? You go off and say, oh yeah, no, people think we're about average when it comes to, going further than most. But actually it's not true. I've just got no idea, and you didn't give me a chance. I haven't got a clue. And what you really need to find out is, does anybody have a clue about where you stand on the environment or whatever it is? So do give people the chance they don't know. I understand people's nervousness about it because, of course, some people just fly through saying don't know to everything. But if you've given people a bit of fun elsewhere and got people engaged, they won't do that. The other thing is about open-ended questions. And For years, quantitative research rather turned its back on open-ended questions. It was only used for stuff like spontaneous awareness questions, where obviously you needed to get people to write in something. We think open ends have a very powerful role to play, because it helps get you to the why. It gets you, why are people answering particular ways? But it does require you to kind of use them in a particular way. You know, there's this kind of window into the mind of respondents. But what you want to do is, you don't want to ask one. If people, certainly most of my team, hate this graphic on the right hand side. You might also join them. They might find it, what the hell are all these lines there? It's basically questions and answers. We've got questions and answers up here, and you ask a question. It's got a series of different answers. You ask another question based on that answer. Now, if you make the error, which I often do, of just asking a question to everyone, and then you realise you've got 2,000 people doing your survey, that's a lot of open ends to look at and analyse in one way, and you've got to pull apart all kinds of stuff. Don't do that. If you don't ask it there, but you ask 7, in this case, different open ends at the end there, which actually reflect on why people have answered the previous question that way. Firstly, you've made life massively simpler for yourself, but also you've made life massively simpler for the respondent, because you're asking them something much more direct, something much more tangible, and much easier for them to answer. So that's what we kind of look to do. I've just thought I'd end with with another, because it is a marketing meeting, so a little sales moment. Sales, it seems to us that surveys, people have got to get into their heads that surveys don't have to be stuck in the past. This is Facebook circa 2004. And my feeling is that still too many of the surveys I come across online look like they were designed about the same time as Mark was putting together the Facebook page. And it's kind of like, well, the world's moved on. Surveys don't have to be like this. They can be like this. These are screenshots from our thing. Color, we like color. We like this sort of stuff. And yes, you can go off and see some of the things that we're doing. We know that what we do generates a positive response amongst respondents. And we know that people give us more time willingly. They actually think our surveys are shorter, but it takes longer. And you can get the same kind of results if you make your surveys fun. And they engage more, they think more deeply, they tell us more. So, shock horror, people engage more with engaging surveys. I think that's the tautology of the day. That's just kind of the way it is. Thank you so much for listening. This is, yes, my last unashamed plug. We have started working with Mark Ritson, and I did like his quote, and yes, okay. We asked Flood to help us because they're better than everyone else, and they made me look good. So thank you all for listening. This is the bit I'm terrified of. Over to you, Joe, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, my friend. It's really, really interesting to get an insight into a world which I'm sure a lot of us would probably have dipped into, but maybe not necessarily given a whole lot of thought to, in the depth there. So actually, I think you've provided an opportunity there to sort of reframe a lot of thoughts about creation of survey. I mean, certainly for me, I was like, wow, yeah, of course. It seems obvious when you think about it, but I think so many of us don't give it that thought, or fall into the traps of doing the same as everyone else. There was a lovely chat comment that just came through from Stuart, who's watching in, who said that he used to work for the Premier Inn, and they've got rid of that survey now.
It was a bit of a killer, that one. That was.
There's a bunch of lovely comments coming through in the chat feature as well. So thank you everyone for chatting along and adding those chat comments as we've gone through. It's really, really interesting and so lovely to hear you all reflect as we go on the session. There's 15 open questions right now, so we've got plenty to get through. And honestly, Vaughan, they're not that bad.
Okay.
They're really good questions. For everyone tuning in, if you head into the Q&A feature right now and give a thumbs up to any questions that you like, I take them from the top. And so if there's any that you really, really like, then I'll prioritise those ones. So thank you also for posting through so many lovely questions. So let's go. And the first one is from Lydia Vaughan, and it's about incentivization of respondents. So Lydia asks, adding a reward, e.g. a voucher, or entering respondents into a raffle always seems to work in terms of increasing the number of completed surveys. Is there a right or a wrong way to go about this? And I guess I can broaden it out and just sort of ask about any general advice that you may have on this.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I think first thing you say, you've got to separate out those surveys that are being done, like many of ours, through kind of panel providers where everybody is incentivized, but at a kind of low rate. So we're talking about things here where you're either talking to your members or you're reaching out to an audience in a kind of more direct way. I think our experience is, yes, incentives work. You know, there's no question that if you want to bump up response, you probably need to incentivize things. In general, and we have done tests with a couple of clients where we've looked at, you know, the bigger one big prize versus more smaller prizes. Is, I guess we sort of ended up, and of course everything depends on your particular budget, but in this particular instance, giving out sort of 4 £100 prizes beats one prize of £400. So yeah, making the prize seem like it's worthwhile is good. So I probably wouldn't go for £5 vouchers because, you know, it's just not worth the effort. But yeah, but make it seem like, oh, I could win that. Where, you know, one prize often seems a bit like backing the Grand National winner on which I did, by the way. That was another story. I did totally by chance, just on the basis of the name. Fan of W.B. Yeats, then that's another story. Sorry about that.
No, I love that. That's really interesting, actually. So thank you for sharing that. And so, you know, there's a bit of context here going on as well, because of course, so you and I and your team have been developing a survey for the marketing meetup, which we're very shortly going to be sending out. In fact, got the email last night to say it's ready. So I'm going to be sending that out in the next couple of days. And I asked that exact same question about incentivization. You know, and actually something you encouraged me to do was think of it as a balancing point as well, you know, in that it didn't feel like you wanted to purely incentivize folks and the only reason they were going to do the survey was the incentive. But equally, there is that sort of balance point, which is like, it may be good to have an incentive, you know, just to push a few more folks through and get the information that hopefully is to improve in their life a little bit more.
I've just also seen a couple of comments come up, which both of which are absolutely spot on. One is a complete no-no, is to use your product as the incentive, because it breaks the MRS guidelines. You've crossed the barrier into sales promotion. You know, you're saying, well, it's a survey, but if you do the survey, we'll send you our lovely product. So must not do that. And of course, this is probably not the place to go into, but if you're talking about sort of medical based research, really of any kind, there are some very particular rules that come into play as well. But I suspect everybody who's in that industry will be kind of more conscious of those. So yeah, we're talking about kind of general mainstreamy type stuff here.
Nice, interesting. So so I didn't know about this. So the MRS guidelines is a thing, though, and that's quite important.
To us, you won't. Yes, we couldn't possibly, you know, say we're doing something for Apple. Big at the end of it, say how much. Oh, let's hand out some you know, iPhones or whatever. At the end of it, it's not going to happen. Shouldn't happen.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. I didn't even know they existed, if I'm honest. So that's
yeah. Okay.
That's a takeaway right there. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just outing myself in front of a bunch of people. I don't know. Hopefully not. Cool. That's really interesting. Thank you for that answer. I really appreciate that. So the next question comes from Claire, and it sort of refers to overstaying your welcome, which you mentioned at the beginning. And I imagine the answer might be a little bit it depends, but nonetheless, it's worth exploring a little bit more. So Claire asks, is there a golden number to the amount of survey questions you found to get the best amount of responses in return, or even the best responses in terms of the quality, however you want to interpret that question?
It has to be a how long is a piece of string type answer, because, you know, if you're talking about, shall we say, I don't know, a utility, chances are people are not really that. I mean, right now that it's okay, it's high interest because of all the terrible cost rises and stuff like that, but it's not intrinsically interesting. If you're talking to a certain audience about motor cars and they like motor cars, you know, you can go on for half an hour longer and people will be engaged if the survey's, you know, well constructed. So it is a bit horse for course. Typically, I mean, our view is alarm bells start ringing for us if any survey looks like it's genuinely going to last more than 15 minutes. There's got to be a good reason to keep it going. Now you can push things if it's engaging enough. I think the real challenge is you've got to ask yourself, do I really need to find this out? Am I asking it because it's be kind of nice to ask? And you kind of think it's that little waffer, you know, it's that thing that you ask because you think it'd be nice, but you're just pushing people towards that boundary. I think for us, sort of 15 minutes, 40-ish questions is kind of the limit. And I think the other thing is, if you think in terms of routing questions, so you don't ask everything to everyone, but you say, okay, if they think that, then I want to find that out. Then that's another way of actually expanding the kind of your worldview, but without making the survey longer for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you for that. There's you sparked a real conversation about Mr. Creosote.
I'm glad he's still recognised. You know, I was slightly worried there. He was of a certain generation.
You're all good. You're all good. It's interesting though as well, because at the beginning you mentioned tone of voice, and I think that the tendency is that so often, like at the beginning of a survey, you'll go, "Oh, it'll only take 5 minutes. It'll only take 5 minutes." You know, and actually, you know, again, in the context of us sort of doing the survey that we did, then like it's not short, but my intention is that with the copy that is accompanying the survey and stuff like that, it's going to be like one of very much in terms of honesty. You know, it's like, this is not a short survey, but we will use this information in this kind of way, you know, and like I'm already being quite conscious in the fact to sort of move away from that sort of, you know, this is a short survey to this is a really valuable survey, and hopefully in return, you know, we're going to make things better for you. I mean, is that the voice thing? It feels important, right?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you just touched on something which, again, I'm sure everybody buys into, but is the importance up front of giving people an honest statement of how long it is going to be. So if it is going to be a 20-minute survey, you just want to tell them up front, because if they're going to stop after 10 minutes and you can't use the survey, then stop wasting everyone's time. And if you encourage, you know, if people have got their expectations set, the other thing is make sure you've got a survey that tells people how far they are through the experience at any given point, so they don't think, how much more of this anyway.
Yeah, there was a lovely comment from Nicole about halfway through, who sort of said that she'd given up on some surveys 10 minutes into doing them because of that very reason, that the expectation hadn't been set at that. So thank you. There's so many good questions here that I'll go on to the next one, and the next one comes from Chris, who asks, is there a good practice way to approach asking the segmentation, quote unquote, golden questions in a survey, or is it really just a necessary evil that when you need to split your results by a segment? So is there a better way than just asking, you know?
It sounds like this man knows more about quant research than I do. With the I'm forgive me if I'm not answering the question you're asking. I'm interpreting this like when you've got a kind of long battery of statements because you want to kind of say, you know, I'm the kind of person who likes, you know, spending all my money down the pub or whatever. That's not a good question, but
I think there might be the demographic questions. Chris. Oh wait, Chris has confirmed what was right.
So yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think I'd have two pieces of advice. The first one is there is a tendency to make those questions scalar. Do I tend not to agree through to I agree. Uh, if you make them binary, you lose virtually nothing. In fact, I think a lot of times you gain something because it's like I'm like that, or I'm not like that. It's much easier to determine, and suddenly something which is kind of becomes a boom, boom, boom. And if you particularly use kind of swipe left, swipe right type approaches, you can get through it a lot quicker. I think the second thing is to think, do you need to ask all those questions all in one block? If you really, and I understand, we serve our clients. Sometimes we're required to do this, but sometimes you've got to ask yourself, could we split it up a bit? So that's another way of minimizing the pain. But the main thing is, so often binary beats a scalar response. And when you come to analyze the results, you'll do exactly the same. You'll have exactly the same information as far as you're concerned from the binary than the scalars. In fact, the scalar stuff gets in the way a lot of the time.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Chris says, thanks. I definitely don't know more about quant than you. So there you go. This next question, I don't know whether it's a bit naughty to ask you, Vaughan. So it's not naughty to ask it, but I don't know whether you have a fair answer because it will be outside of your wheelhouse. So if you say you don't know, then it's all good. We can move on very quickly. The question comes from Lex, who asks, I rely on Google Forms a lot, which typically isn't very meaningful or tangible when looking for responses. It's a little bit more abstract or numeric. Do you have suggestions for other, and it's qualified by free, survey builders that might be a bit more friendly?
In honesty, no, because I apologize. I mean, if I genuinely did think there was a great free thing out there to use, I'd say. But I mean, obviously, we spend our time building our own things, and we don't tend to look at the free thing. But I do think I think you can still take those free tools and still, there's nothing there to stop the tone not being the right tone.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe getting them saying errors is a bit difficult because they all seem to be built into a lot of the platforms. But no, I'm afraid I'm sorry, but I don't. We're very reasonable there.
Very good. Nice. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Actually, you know what? People are loving Chris's questions today because the next two questions are the ones that are the most thumbed up, and they're both from Chris. There's 24 open questions, however. So, folks, if you want to see any more that you like and want answering, then don't forget to give them a thumbs up because I'm taking them from the top. So the next one comes from Chris, as I say, who says 11-point versus 7-point versus 5-point scale questions. Data people like bigger scales for regression analysis, but I feel humans prefer smaller scales when each answer is more distinct. Do you have any rules of thumb? I think you largely covered this in the presentation, but do you prefer big points or little points?
Again, it's a difficult one to be sort of dogmatic on because it depends so much on what it is that you want to explore. The little example we use, which is a genuine example of on an employee engagement thing, going from how challenging is your work from a 1 to 7 to a verbal scale. One of the first things you immediately think is, okay, we've got to come up with 7 statements, and he was like, actually, there are not 7 steps here that make sense. You're suddenly making it hard. So he said, actually, in this instance, there are 6 steps, and each of these things, because they make sense in their own right, that's what they use. I think bizarrely, because I don't know, people expect me to be kind of down on Net Promoter Score, but I actually think that the psychology of the Net Promoter Score I have massive sympathy with, which is, because I think the easiest scale for most people to get is rating something from 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, because it's kind of, it's something that happens throughout sort of life. But the magic in NPS, of course, is understanding that basically any score below a 9 is just saying, yeah, you're right, yeah, maybe. And then anything, if you get down to a certain point, it's actually, yeah, I don't know, but you're not that great to me. So that kind of works because it highlights that actually, really the gap between a 2 and a 6 is nothing but compared to the gap between an 8 and a 9, and those things are not there. I mean, you can write essays on the kind of the Likkert's 5-point, 7-point scale, which, given you've got a lot of other questions, I'm gonna duck out of, because actually a lot cleverer people than me have written more worthy things on it. But pause for course is what I'd say.
I think you've given a really grounded response there, so I really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm impressed actually, because I feel like I'm throwing these at you, and you're finding the underlying principles. So I'm really grateful. Thank you, Vaughan. Actually, it's interesting because the next question is about NPS. And actually, you know what? You've already answered it, because Chris does ask, is there a better way to ask these questions? And specifically because Chris suggests that sort of, stakeholders like asking those questions.
Yeah.
Is there a better way?
Well, I mean, I'm glad. And is that Chris who also put a comment about cultural differences making, and that is absolutely right as well, of course. Yes. That's where it goes. So yes, you've got to look at things in the different cultures. For us, we use a measure which we call instinctive choice, where basically we identify the brands that people kind of use or consider, and then we put them up and we give them typically 4 seconds to say, okay, you've got 4 seconds to say which one of these are you going to buy. Mm-hmm. And it's measuring something slightly different, but clients that have adopted it tend to find it very powerful.
I love that. Thank you very much. There's a comment that's come through from Jason on a question that I can answer, which has only been sent to hosts and panelists, so most folks will be able to see it in the chat feature. But it's the very important question from today: is there a shoe hanging from your plant pot there, Joe? Those are my first pair of shoes, and then so that's the answer to that question. So there's a great question that's come here through, and I'm afraid I'm not going to try and butcher the pronunciation. I'm really sorry, but the question is, how do you create the narrative of the story in the first place? So this question came through when you were showing the how you use your tech to sort of have that listening. But I think it's a really interesting question that sort of broadens out into, how do you sort of create a survey where you know that you're not just going to be looking to sort of speak around your own biases, rather than trying to create something that actually will give you the information that you need? How can you question the questions, I guess, is a way of asking things.
I think, again, I think that is, in a sense, sort of the biggest question and the biggest issue that we particularly face, particularly when you're kind of looking at sort of brand health and market studies, where clients understandably are preoccupied with their issues, but it is looking through that. You're in danger of looking down the telescope the wrong way. And so, you dive into asking all these questions about, how highly do you rate us on our environmental credentials or whatever, when you haven't really established, do you know me? Do you ever think about this category? I mean, one of the favorite charts we like to present to people is, think about how much of the brain your customers spend thinking about your topic. Mm-hmm. And chances are it's absolutely tiny. And most of the time it's nothing there at all. So we've got to be especially careful. It's like being brain surgeon. If you go in there with your big tools, your kind of big hammers and this, that, and the other, you're going to make a mess. And what you come out with isn't going to be particularly meaningful, because you've totally distorted the way that people look at the world. So for us, going back to try and answer this question, I think you kind of want to start broad. You want to look at the world from the broadest possible lens, rather than getting into your specific concerns. So, and ask those big questions, like, ask how much time they spend thinking about this, on preferably on a verbal scale, like none at all, once in a blue moon, blah, through to constantly. because some things are constantly on the mind. It's not that everything's at the back of the mind. But to do that, to get that sense of perspective. And again, the other big principle, like with the story question, is always start. Oh, sorry, my hands are not showing. Start wide. That's supposed to be wide. End up narrow. But you're taking people down the funnel, on a journey, and obviously through careful routing, you can end up in very different places, which is trying to emulate, I suppose, the qual process insofar as you can in quant.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. No, that's it's really interesting. Of course, it always goes back to the principles which you opened up at the beginning of the presentation with, right? It's not data; it's human beings, and actually taking people on that journey and sort of appreciating your place in the world and also the context in which they're answering their questions. They're all good questions to ask up front. Or certainly from everything you said, you've inspired me to think that even more. That's really, really useful. So thank you for sharing that. We'll take this last question, which is from Anonymous, but it has been thumbed up. The most of the remaining questions, and I'm probably going to broaden it out once again, because the question is, are QR codes a good way of moving customers online to answer surveys? Are there any other options? But I guess really the broader question involved is, we all spend so long trying to get survey respondents and stuff like that. Have you seen effective ways to get folks to answer your surveys beyond honesty? I guess a very tactical question, really, in terms of getting survey respondents.
I think you saved the hardest question for me till last. I mean, for us, being totally open about this, I mean, most of the time we go out there and the clients we're dealing with, they're buying their sample, they're getting their sample in, and so the issue for us is not so much getting them, it's holding on to them and getting them to tell us as much as possible, getting them to say what they. So I'm not especially expert when it comes to using QR codes. Well, I would say that if you think of dear old Jeff Bezos and Amazon and how you become very wealthy, is by and large is you make things as simple as possible for people. And so you've got to look at QR codes and think they've got to be a fabulous way in principle of getting people to your door and getting people into the survey. So yeah, it's got to be good. It's just make sure that once they're at your door, you bring them in, give them a cup of tea, sit them down, make them relax, and do all those things that are going to make them stick around and actually make it worth the effort of you getting them in the first place.
100%. That's lovely. Thank you very, very much, Vaughan. I really appreciate it. And of course, that is the job of marketers as well, right? To sort of be able to go out and sort of position these things in such a way where folks want to engage with it. We actually partner, one of our sponsors is a company called Attest, who are a panel survey software, and they make it super easy for folks to be able to find survey respondents as well. So I definitely recommend looking into that. With all that said, Vaughan, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
And for really, sort of flipping the narrative a little bit on surveys, certainly in my mind, and hopefully for everyone watching in this morning as well. I think that's been a real interesting deep dive into this. It's quite inspiring in a way, in a very sort of marketing geek kind of way. So thank you very, very much. With all that said, thank you, Vaughan, and thank you to everyone for watching in this morning. It's really, really appreciated. I see that Chris has posted a clapping emoji in there, right there. I think Chris also needs a clap for the questions in return. Please do take the time to check out our featured sponsor for this week, who are Redgate Software. Great company to work for and hiring marketers right now. Next week we're back on Thursday because it's Easter and a lot of folks will be away and stuff like that. So we're back with our lightning talk session, and I cannot wait to share with you the folks who will be speaking on that day. It's going to be a really great, high energy, fun session. So I really hope you can make it for that. If you're not sure whether you want to attend or not, I'd really recommend taking a leap of faith and sort of come to the session. I think it'll be a lot of fun. With all these lovely chat messages coming through, I will see you next Thursday And thank you all so much for being here. It's always wicked to spend the time. I really appreciate it. Take care, everyone, and see you soon.